So I'm Robin Sutherland. I'm Vice President of Clinical Operations and Human Resources for Renovia, and my colleague here.
I'm Maddie Colbert-Notaro. I am the Chief Operating Officer for Obvio Health. Obvio Health is a virtual research organization concentrating our efforts, is that better? On the decentralized clinical trial solution, pretty much just bringing research trials into our homes. Next slide. Are we controlling the slides?
All right. So Renovia is a digital therapeutic company focused on women's pelvic floor health. We have an FDA-cleared device that treats urinary incontinence, stress, urge, as well as mixed incontinence. We've just recently received breakthrough designation devices for fecal incontinence, and we look forward to our FDA clearance later this year.
So when we were first working with the Renovia team and learning about their project needs and learning what the outcomes were that Renovia wanted to achieve, we knew that our business model, our structure, was perfectly aligned with the needs of this project and that we can provide them with a very comprehensive solution. So like any CRO, we provide same services: data management, medical writing, biostats, scientific affairs. Of course, it's ahead of our digital platform system, but it's our virtual site team that's kind of like the chef's kiss for this project, because they were able to provide that kind of concierge service for the participant to support them throughout their entire journey of the project. So our virtual site team is much like any other site team that you would find at a traditional site. They operate in the same way. We have investigators, we have coordinators, just in the same way, except that we work remotely. But they are there to support the participant if they have any questions, if they have any issues, if they have questions about the device, the app, if they need help maintaining their compliance. So they're supporting their participants throughout their entire journey, and they feel like they have a human connection with them because they can respond to them at any time throughout the trial.
All right, so we ran an RCT that we kicked off September 2020, and we wrapped it up in April 2021. Our goal was to test the efficacy of our Leva product against the traditional treatment for incontinence, which is Kegel exercises. So this is an 8-week randomized study. We were looking to enroll just north of 350 individuals. We were going to have a 15-site study, knowing that traditionally recruitment of 2 patients a week per site would be pretty much the expectation, but we had a really tight time frame. COVID started to hit. I'm based in Boston. Between Washington State, New York, and Boston with our Biogen management conference there, it became clear to us that we were going to have a real challenge if we tried to do 15 sites. Could the site stay open? We also knew that we would skew older, because while UI will hit about 50% of women, it especially starts to hit over the age of 50. We knew that those women would be more conservative about probably taking care of themselves during COVID. We knew that the site-based study may not be an option because we knew that there would be risk of these academic medical centers closing non-essential care. So while we were thinking about being hybrid with possibly screening and enrollment happening at the site, everything else virtually, we made the cutover in February 2020 and decided to go fully virtual. So what were our concerns? Well, obviously technology. We work exclusively with academic medical centers, and we knew that they may not be comfortable with the concept of a fully virtual trial, especially because they'd never done that before. Further, would they be comfortable with the e-consent, with having training occur virtually? Would they be comfortable managing AEs virtually? So we had to do all of that. We also had to worry about patient engagement. There was really not a lot of data about loss of patients, loss to study follow-up in the digital community, except with a very old Pfizer study. And that was kind of frightening. So we knew we had to look at how to power the study and over-enroll and make sure we hit our power. And then safety. How do you manage AEs remotely? So these were all concerns. We turned to Obvio as the most flexible of the CROs that we had spoken with, and we needed to have all of these needs met.
So enrolling women was one of the things that we thought might be a little bit challenging. Women we're busy. We're busy taking care of our children, our families, nurturing our careers. We don't have a whole lot of time to be going to a doctor's office and spending an hour in the waiting room and then another hour in the exam room and have to be burdened by that. It's like a burden. So we wanted to take that away from them. Also, it's kind of like a sensitive topic. It's intimate. It could be a little embarrassing. We didn't really want to talk about that with our providers. So we thought for the women in the study, this decentralized clinical trial option was perfect for them because they could participate in this trial, test out the device, see if it helped with their symptoms, even made them go away. And they could do all of that from the comfort of their own homes without ever burdening themselves, without ever interrupting their normal daily lives. And they can do all that from home. They didn't have to go to the office. So it was a perfect, easy way to enroll the women for this project.
So this was the first fully virtual study ever done within the urogynecology space, and to the best of our PI's knowledge, the same thing in the OBGYN space. So it was obviously pretty risky for us because we had no idea whether or not we'd be able to have the readout that we hoped for.
So how did we recruit these women? Well, we used precision digital recruitment via social media. So what we did is that we developed very creative ads, and we wanted to place them in front of the social media marketing platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and others, but mainly those. And we wanted to place them in front of our target population. But we didn't want to place those ads in front of everybody on Facebook or Twitter because that would, one, cost a lot of money, two, would take a lot of time, and three, she wouldn't be too happy with that. So we had to think of a way to target our population. Now, let me give you an analogy. If we want to find Mercedes-Benz buyers, well, I'm not going to go to a big, huge car show, to find those buyers. I'm going to go right to the Mercedes-Benz dealership, and I'm going to stand right there. It's going to cost me a lot less money. It's going to take me a lot less time, and I'm going to find my buyers right there. Well, this is the exact same premise. What we did is that we studied the internet searching behaviors or the internet purchasing behaviors of these women. So if women were to be searching urinary incontinence or pelvic floor disorder, or they were purchasing garments for those conditions, then that's the women that we wanted to place our target, our landing page right in front of. So picture this. We have the women that are looking through their Facebook page. They land on our ad. Do you have urinary incontinence? And they're like, yeah, I have leakage. Yeah, I want to know about this. So they pressed on the ad. They went to our landing page, and the landing page told them all about the project, what is involved, how long is it going to be, what is your participation in it. And at that point, if they said, yeah, I want to learn about this, I want to see if this helps me, they would answer the pre-screening questionnaires. Those questions would come to our virtual site team. Of course, our system has intelligence that can, say if a participant met the eligibility criteria or didn't. And once they, met the criteria, then we would then send them an invitation to download the app. They would do the informed consent process, and so it begins. So we had to, of course, be very methodical about it. We couldn't just place a bunch of ads in front of, a bunch of people. We did use a lot of ads. All of these ads were shown to all of the demographic population, but we did split it up by age group because that's actually what worked the best. So you can see here for the younger population, we used more of a techie approach, keyboards, apps, things that they could identify with. With the middle-aged population, we used a garment bag travel bag filled with a bunch of garments, because when you're traveling and you have UI, you're going to need a lot of garments. And for the older population, we used a clothesline and put garments on it because that's what they could identify with. But you would think that a recruitment method that's this sophisticated would be very expensive. I thought that too, but it wasn't actually. As you can see here, the cost per click was about between $1 and $2 per click. Of course, the older population, they have this condition, easier to get, cheaper to get. The younger population, they don't suffer from this as much, so harder to get, more expensive. But it was a great recruitment method that worked really well, and I think Renovia was very happy with that.
We were actually amazed. We started recruiting in September, and we finished enrollment with the last few stragglers in March. So you're talking rapid enrollment. So we had a real collaborative effort. Not only did we collaborate with Obvio Health, but we had 4 academic medical centers that we worked with. So once they went to the landing page and they pre-screened and were invited to officially screen, That's when they entered all of their medical and demographic information and did validated surveys. Obvio's medical director at that point would go ahead and be sure they were qualified. If they were not qualified, he politely declined them. If they were qualified, then it went to our PI review from Kaiser. She made the decision, did they meet all inclusion and exclusion criteria? If they met inclusion criteria, they then went on to do a 3-day bladder diary. If they completed the bladder diary, that's when our teams from the University of Alabama and the University of New Mexico Health Science Center qualified those. We had really strict criteria for what we consider to be urinary incontinence. If they leaked once in 3 days, that doesn't count. If they leak 20 times a day, something's very wrong. So we had to go through a pretty rigorous process to standardize how we decided to enroll folks. Once enrolled, that is when we used our sites, UAB and University of New Mexico, to go ahead and do the training with these folks. We had a balanced study because, as you know, when research is published, there's always folks who critique it. There's a lot of feedback. There's a lot of controversy at times. And Kegels versus Leva, we can't just, we didn't want to strictly have Leva without any question win this race. So we did training with both women. And we'll talk about that in a little more detail in a moment.
So then here we arrive at the screening phase, and here's where the participants complete all the screening questionnaires. Of course, those responses come back to our virtual site team. Again, the system has built-in intelligence to tell us who has met the criteria and who hasn't. But once the participant enters the maintenance phase, it's our job to make sure that the participants stay compliant throughout their entire journey of the trial. But we don't do that all by ourselves. The system actually helps us really maintain that compliance. Because when we first started developing the design for the study with Renovia, we actually programmed in system-programmed alerts, reminders, notifications throughout their entire journey of the project to help the participant remember, don't forget to complete your questionnaires or your research-related tasks. On the back end, the same way with the portal, with our virtual site team. Hey, we've got so-and-so patient, Jane Smith, who isn't really doing their questionnaires the way they're supposed to. You might want to reach out. So the participants simply just got a notification on their phone saying, don't forget to complete your research-related tasks, and we were able to maintain the compliance that way by following up with the participants whenever we needed to.
All right, back to training. So again, balanced study. Typically, when a woman talks to her physician about urinary incontinence, she's given a handout on how to do Kegels and sent on her way. If she sees a urogynecologist, she'll have the gold standard, which is to see pelvic floor physical therapy. But again, wanting a balanced study, we wanted it to be more, way better than just a handout. So everyone who was in the active control group not only got the handout from the Voices for Pelvic Floor Disorders that is put out by the American Urogynecology Association, we actually created a video for them. And then they had 3 calls with research coordinators and research nurses to be sure they understood how to do them, committed to 3 times daily per protocol. And if they had any questions, they were able to talk with us. Simultaneously, those who were using Leva had 3 calls as well. 1, to be sure that they understood how to use the app that goes along with the device. Number 2, how to set reminders for themselves and be sure they're storing the device properly so they didn't run down the battery. And 3rd, just to make sure everything was going well. So data capture. These women input all of their own data into the clinical app that you see in front of you, which was developed by Obvio, including the Bladder Diary. The progress all along the way, from the moment they began the screening with validated surveys right through the end of the study, you could see at any point where they were in the process, which was great. Anytime also that an AE was identified, because the app sends out very frequent questions about how you're doing. If they say, I have a cold, I have a fever, I sprained my ankle, it would trigger for additional information to be captured. Obvio's medical director would then be sure the information was complete and, as necessary, escalated it to our PI, who is based out of Mass General. In terms of the Bladder Diary, and again, anyone who's ever worked with the Bladder Diary in research or clinical care knows it's really more of a cognitive test than a test of urinary incontinence. There's no one good Bladder Diary. They're all crazy. But what we had to have captured was how much liquid did they consume? How often did they use the bathroom? How often did they leak? How often was there a sense of urgency? How bothersome was it? And then we also measured by self-report using a validated scale, pelvic organ prolapse. We also looked at fecal incontinence. We also did a sexuality component to that as well because UI and FI really impacts that. So we did baseline and at 8 weeks.
So we had a lot of good outcomes for this project. We were excited that we were able to take it to the end with great positive, outcomes. So first good news is that, you heard me say it, we had successful recruitment. We were able to successfully invite 6,000 participants who were interested in or clicked through our landing page, but we actually enrolled 350 participants in just 14 weeks. You and I both know that's very, very fast. So we were very happy that we were able to do that. And it wasn't expensive. If you go to a traditional study, it's going to cost you about between $600 and $2,000 per participant to enroll them into your trial. But this only cost us $67 per participant. So I think Robin was very happy that it wasn't very expensive to recruit her patients in such a short amount of time.
And we shared the savings.
Yeah, true. That's true. That is true. And the fact that we were able to recruit a diverse population. You see, when you have a traditional study, we're not geographically bound. We can enroll from anywhere around the world, in this case, from the United States. We don't have to go to a particular city, to a particular site, and enroll within that radius of that site. We can enroll from anywhere, so we had a very diverse population. On top of that, we had 22% of our population was over the age of 65. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, how did they navigate through the app at 65? Well, no problem. I'm going to show you the compliance rates in a minute. But the whole world has a smartphone. Our app is very, very easy. And if we're not sure if it's easy for you, then that's okay, because we have training materials that are in there, training, videos and all kinds of things to help you, plus the virtual site team navigate throughout the app. Second good news is that we had great, strong patient engagement. And that, again, was in part because of the virtual site team that helping along with the participants to help them stay retained. So they felt like they had this trusting relationship with their virtual site team because they were able to communicate with them at any time via the app using the instant messenger. So they didn't have to wait for a phone call at the doctor's office to get back to them a day later. They were able to just contact them via messaging at any time, and they were able to keep them retained, engaged, which of course leads to later compliance. We also had a little bit of a daily 15-minute team huddle to really go over the device, any tech issues that the device may have that the women were experiencing. And that really helped keep them engaged and retained as well. Here we have our compliance rates, which don't happen unless you keep the patients engaged, retained. So you'll see that our compliance rates were 88% and 91%. Amazing. I mean, every study you know that if you don't have your patients complete, then you can't power your study, and you didn't get your good sample size. So Renovia told us, above all else, our patients have to complete so that we can do the proper analysis. Well, our patients that were less than 65 years of age completed at a rate of 88%. But here we go. Our patients that were greater than 65 years of age, they completed at 91%. So you see they had no issue with the app or the system or the device or the process. They went right through. And in keeping with that, this is why, another reason why, again, I think Robin coined them as our secret sauce for the study, is what she said, the virtual site team, which we call the coach team, which stands for Clinical Oversight and Coordination Hub. Again, the virtual site team, like I said, is responsible for compliance and all the things that we talked about. But what I didn't mention, I think Robin did, is that they're also responsible for safety. So we monitor the safety of our participants. So you know that in the traditional setting, when a participant leaves your office, you're not going to find out about that adverse event for another, week, a month, 6 months, whenever they come back. We can actually obtain adverse events in near real time. And how it works is like this. Every day we'll send a notification to the participant that says, how are you feeling? Are you feeling okay? You have anything to report? If they say, I'm fine, nothing to report, thank you. If they say, actually, I have a fever, I don't feel well, the system has built-in intelligence or logic that will then deploy a health complaint form. In that form, it'll ask them questions like, well, what do you have? I have a fever. Well, when did it start? When did it stop? How severe was it? Did you take anything for it? And if they said, yes, I did take something for it, then the system will deploy a concomitant medication form. That form will say, well, what did you take? How much did you take? When did you start taking it? When did you stop? And ask all those questions ahead of time. And then once they're done asking the questions, that AE will come to our virtual site team, and our principal investigators, our coordinators will review the adverse event, and our principal investigator will contact the participant if they need any more information, and then process the AE through resolution or when the trial completes. So you see, that's a gift. That is a gift to our industry that technology is bringing to us, because we didn't have that before. There were pain points and gaps in the traditional setting that we don't really have so much now here. And lastly, well, not lastly, but almost lastly, and what leads to the most important one is the fact that we were able to achieve statistically significant outcomes with the Leva device over the control group, the Kegels group. So the primary outcome here was the UDI-6, the urinary distress inventory. And you can see here that the test group, the Leva group, showed greater improvement at week 4 over the control group. And then again, even better improvement on week 8 over the control group. And then the perceived improvement, which is much better, or very much better, again, the Leva group had greater improvement at week 4 over the control group. The change from the baseline to week 8 was even more significant. So what does that say? Well, the Leva device worked. It worked. We proved that the Leva device reduced the urinary distress and had perceived improvement in their symptoms over the Kegel group. So we were thrilled for Renovia that they were able to achieve those outcomes, because that's exactly what we were hoping would happen, and we proved that it did.
I was just going to say, and again, it wasn't the typical Kegel sheet, go home, do your exercises. Yeah. This was a very active control. So as Renovia, you can imagine that we were really quite nervous. So we were thrilled to get this result. Yeah. And thrilled even because often a control group will drop out if they're not happy. Between Obvio and our protocol, we were able to keep them engaged. That is amazing. That just doesn't typically happen. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So it leads to that.
So I'm really pleased to say that just several weeks ago, we found out that we won an excellent award for our research with the Medical Device Network, and over 1,000 submissions. And we had some exceptionally credible competitors, and our little company won. And it's because it was a fully virtual study with incredibly high participation rates, very little fall off. And we were able to do something novel in the industry. So I think they rewarded us for taking such a huge risk. And again, we could not have done that without Obvio, which is the only reason I'm standing here today. So, with every study, there's always opportunities for improvement. And it was the blind leading the blind. I knew we wanted to take a site-based protocol, move it into the virtual world, and we worked incredibly, incredibly hard to do this. Some of the challenges we had was when you think about a smartphone app, and knowing that our population would probably skew older, we wanted to be sure that the font size was large enough and the display was really well done with the figure ground resolution it needed, because we couldn't risk a negative study because somebody was going to select accidentally a response they hadn't meant to on a survey. So that was critical, and we worked that through before, of course, we launched the study. Something we learned about 15 or 20 patients into the study, however, was that for the 24-hour, 3-time 24-hour bladder diary capture was based off of Greenwich time, not the time zone that a woman was in. And so it was throwing everything off. So Obvio was incredibly responsive to get their developers, I think they must have had to beat them, to get this done in just a few days so that the remainder of our patients had accurate 24-hour capture based upon their time zone. That's way harder than you would think it is. It's like, yeah, it's time zone. but programmers, when it's a pretty fixed platform, that's a challenge. Drink reporting, we talked about how Bladder Diaries can be more of a cognitive challenge than not. You have a big iced coffee and you sip it over 4 hours. When do you report that? So we had to really work with folks. And then video. At the time, there wasn't video capacity. So we didn't use Zoom, we didn't use Teams. It was phone calls between either the participant and the site around e-consent or with our clinical research staff based across the country. Now they're about to launch with that eye-to-eye contact. But we were very, very anxious about that because we needed to retain these patients. We needed 299 women to complete, to be appropriately powered, and we were able to exceed that, thankfully. All right.
So, I mean, Robin's right. There were some uphill climbs. Of course, there are going to be. This is a new model, and we're all evolving, and we're all learning. So, of course, there were some uphill climbs. But with lessons learned, there's growth. So here we are about to launch the next generation of our platform. And we took all of, Robin's comments, and we applied them and wanted to make sure that we provided a very robust platform coming up in the next few months. So our platform is going to include a lot more flexibility, modularity, and it's going to be a lot more comprehensive for our participants. Just the ePro alone, which we're calling the augmented ePro, is pretty sophisticated because right now when you're completing questionnaires, it's kind of subjective, right? I mean, if you're asking a question like, well, how many wrinkles do you have? Is it mild? Is it moderate? Is it severe? I might look in the mirror and say, oh my God, it's a lot, but maybe somebody else might think differently. So this takes the subjectivity away from it. We're going to be having image capture, audio capture, and with the image capture in this example, you can just scan your face kind of like this, and it'll be able to capture exactly what, the wrinkle assessment would be normally, and we have the raters behind it too. So plus we have a more sophisticated e-consent process. Our consent process is pretty tight right now. It has to be because the FDA really pays attention to that, of course, but our e-consent is going to be more interactive. And like Robin said, more video chatting with our participants. So we're very excited about launching this next gen platform and having more flexibility and modularity because that translates for more effectiveness, more efficiency for our participants, all of it translating into for our participants itself and not just our clients. So at the end of the day, the decentralized model, I think is changing the world in a lot of ways because we're bringing such efficiency into our industry that we've never been able to see before on all these years. And to have this now is really a huge gift.
All right, so in conclusion, our digital recruitment that we worked so closely with for Obvio, the user-friendly apps, both their Claim It app, which is where they all participants did their data entry, as well as our Renovia app for the LEVA, and then the virtual site team, both Obvio's and our academic medical centers, really was what made the difference between this being even more risky versus this being something that was really quite substantial. And I'm pleased to say that on March 10th, our publication will drop in the largest female health magazine, peer-reviewed health magazine. It's embargoed, so I can't say more about it, but some of you in that space know which color magazine I'm referring to. And then it'll be in print. And, when you're talking about a peer-reviewed journal such as that, that is tough to get them to accept a manuscript. And they did with the few revisions such as A and things like that. So we were really, really pleased about that. And again, if we didn't have Obvio as a partner, I'm not sure that Renovia would have had this outcome. So thank you again.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you. So that concludes our presentation, and we want to thank you for joining. But if you have any questions, we'd like to take them.
In the back.
One second.
Did both of them get the app, the Kegel control group and the others to support, or only the people?
It was balanced. So both the active control group with the Kegels and the LEVA group got those 3 phone calls from our research teams.
But only one got the Obvio.
Oh, they both got the Obvio app, and obviously only the folks who used LEVA got our LEVA app.
Okay. Yeah, just wanted to make sure, because a lot of times engagement actually sometimes skews the compliance part of it. So I just wanted to know if it went to both groups.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jason Jones from Urogynecology. I was interested in the timing of your recruitment. Did that correspond with the COVID pandemic? Was it before, after, during? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, it launched in early September 2020. And we were quite anxious about when would we have ourselves ready to go. Would, in fact, we be mid-September, late September, November? We knew we had really tight time frames. We enrolled our first person September 30th, 2020, and our last in March of 2021. So we were right in the heart of COVID. And we were fortunate because our research teams, I mean, Obvio is easily remote, but then all of our academic medical centers, they had pretty much shut down. So all of these research nurses and coordinators were based out of their homes and able to meet our needs. But 100% during COVID.
And actually, we were competing against Black Friday ads,
We were.
Christmas, what's the other one that comes after
Cyber
that?
Monday.
Cyber Monday, that one. I should have known that.
And Election Day.
And yes, exactly.
With all those political ads. And that really drove the cost way up for the cost per click.
Well, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it's not your fault. I'll just, know in the future.
But yeah, we were competing. So we were like, oh, this is not the best time to launch. But it worked out great. Even with all of that, we still enrolled in 14 weeks. Anyone else?
Well, thank you. You've been a great audience.
Oh no, you had a question. Go ahead.
I have a question. Did you follow up after 8 weeks beyond? Is that going to be in the paper?
We
to
have.
show what's
So
long term?
we've just submitted our abstract to OGS for the 6-month data, and Obvio is finishing up. I think within the next week or two, we'll have the 12-month data as well, because we want to have that health economic look, and we know the durability of the device for 6 months, even though 13 women were the only ones who continued to use it. We saw durability of treatment, which was fantastic, and now we'll see what happens at a year.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone.
Now.